And that, tragically, wraps it up for Roger Delgado as the Master. Welcome to the Time Treadmill. I'm Ron, and these are my sweaty thoughts about Doctor Who. Roger Delgado's Master was originally supposed to appear in one more story in the following season, and it was a story that was going to wrap up the entire Doctor-Master storyline. And in fact, the original idea was for the Master to die at the end of the next story, to conclude their entire story arc. And this was largely due to the fact that Roger Delgado wanted to move on from the role. He didn't want to be typecast as the part of the Master. Unfortunately, on the 18th of June 1973, Roger Delgado was working on a comedy series in Turkey, and while riding in a chauffeur-driven car, the vehicle lost control and went into a ravine, and everyone aboard died. Roger Delgado, therefore, was the first major actor in the history of Doctor Who to pass away. It was very tragic and much too young. This then, unfortunately, makes Frontier in Space the final appearance of Roger Delgado as the Master, and it's such an unceremonious ending. He isn't even defeated in the story so much as evaded. The Doctor escapes, there's a flurry of activity, and the Master is pushed off to the side. That entire ending was to set up a return of the Master that never ever happened. And the Master's ending in this story is further weakened by the fact that at the very end of the 6th episode, it turns out his accomplices are, surprise, the Daleks, which makes him not even the ultimate bad guy of his final story. It's just really, really sad. And as for the Daleks themselves, I have an author friend, Rick Hoskin, who's joked about writing a Doctor Who story titled The Surprising End of the Daleks at the end of the first episode, because of Terry Nation's habit of having the Daleks surprisingly appear at the end of the first episode of whatever new story they're in. Here, they surprisingly appear at the end of the 6th episode of what is essentially a 12-episode Dalek story where the Daleks don't appear for half the story. It's just, like I was saying yesterday, my fundamental problem with Frontier in Space is that there is no there. I mean, I guess there's the threat of the Earth Draconia War, but that's not even averted by the end of the story. Instead, the players behind the scenes are finally unmasked so that we can get to the actual story. You know what it reminds me of? When I was in college, I took a class that was History of the Vietnam Conflict. I took it specifically because I was born in 1968. I was much too young to remember the Vietnam conflict directly myself, although much of my childhood was shaped by the politics and events that grew out of that conflict. But even so, I knew very little about the conflict itself aside from, whatever I'd seen in TV and movies. And so I thought it would be really interesting to take a college-level history class that talked about the war and really educated me on the intricacies of what happened. And here's what happened in that class. The professor spent 3/4 of the duration of the class talking about the run-up to the war. We spent weeks and weeks and weeks studying about the French involvement in Vietnam and all of these other things and all this background. And it wasn't until 2 weeks before the end of the class before we actually reached American involvement in Vietnam. It was a really frustrating experience. And looking back, I understand why he structured the class the way he did, because he was more interested in delving into the causes and events that shaped the conflict. But that's not the class I was interested in. That wasn't what I came to learn. And I feel exactly that way with this combination of Frontier in Space and Planet of the Daleks. Planet of the Daleks is basically American involvement in the war. And Frontier in Space is that all those other weeks of class that was just what feels to me like wasted effort. So, on the upside, now all of that wasted effort is expended and we can actually get on to the real story. On the downside, the real story is a Dalek story. So that's what I'll be doing tomorrow. Until then, you stay home, stay safe, be kind, be patient, and I will see you tomorrow with Daleks.